So welcome everyone to this Thursday night Dharma talk. Welcome in the Zendo. Welcome in the cloud. At Mountain Cloud, we are still basking in the glow, you could say the afterglow maybe, of our 40th anniversary celebration just this past weekend. If you weren't able to be here, some couldn't be, two of the sessions were recorded and will be circulated. And there are still flyers in the foyer. I think Scott mentioned it's really an attractive artifact that just gives a sense of what we celebrated and some cues about how to keep celebrating. Just looking at this morning again, what are we celebrating? A millennia of stewardship. Humans, plants, and animals caring for this land, offering us a place of communion with life. 40 years of practice. Practitioners coming and going, each leaving it better than they found it. A living stillness. The land, facilities, and practice itself, tended with care, so stillness endures. Daily sittings, hybrid meditation, every day. The gift of Dharma, 4 weekly talks and discussions, freely offered and shared online for all. Living connections. Teachers near and far, from Valerie and Scott to Rion Roshi, our abbot, deepening our ties across Sanbo Zen. And finally, a global Sangha, growing, practicing, and realizing together, even amid a world of change and challenge. Among the festivities, these 2 full days, the part that touched me the most was our founders' storytelling circle. 20 founders attended that evening event, 90 people total. So festive, and we gathered in the Zendo. There were 2 chairs, it was beautifully set, so 2 by 2 they came forward and shared stories of what went into the founding of this center. And there were challenges. I mean, I've heard a lot of those stories before, but to hear them just in these different voices was really impressive, inspiring. I was struck, and I mentioned this at some point during the weekend, by the light in the eyes of those 20 founders. Something about this practice over time. We were honoring them along with their efforts, their stories, and they were thanking us. I mentioned Dogen's phrase, continuous practice. And a couple days later, saw Will, and he said, continuous founding. That's what we're doing. Brought to mind a passage from the sayings of Joshu. A monk asked Joshu, when great difficulties arise, or one translation says, when they fall upon us, how can they be avoided? Asks the monk. And Joshu says, welcome, welcome. Of course, not just the difficulty, all of it. So tonight, in the wake of this inspiration and shared gratitude, I'd like to take up a koan that addresses us wherever we are on this path, at the core of this practice. It's case 62 from the Book of Equanimity, or Shoyoroku, and the title of the case is Beiko's Enlightenment or Not. Here's the case. Beiko had a monk ask Kyozan, "Do people these days need enlightenment or not?" Kyozan said, "It is not that there is no enlightenment, yet how can it be helped that it falls into the secondary class?" The monk went back to Beiko and told him about it. Beiko deeply agreed. So Beiko and Kyozan, these two masters in this case, they both were disciples and Dharma heirs of Isan, great master. They knew each other well. But here, Beiko sends one of his monks to ask this question of Kyozan, really to sort of check his state of mind. Do people these days need, or sometimes translated resort to, or depend on enlightenment or not? People these days. Beiko's really asking, do you need enlightenment? Do you rely on it? Is there even such a thing? And Kyozan's response pleases Beiko. It's not that there is no enlightenment, yet how can it help? How can it be helped? That it is secondary, that it falls into the secondary class. Some years ago, we took up this koan in the Sanbo Zen annual teacher training, or Kenshukai. Someone there tried to argue, one of our peers, that fundamentally there is no such thing as enlightenment. Ryon Roshi listened and then countered with the story from years ago of sleeping in the adjacent room when his father woke, his father Yamada Koen Roshi, woke in the middle of the night and was suddenly seized, however you describe it, by a great falling away. Total. Ryon Roshi, I think he was about 12, yeah, about that, and he heard this great uproarious laughter, unlike anything he'd ever heard. And so coming from the room next door, and he slid the rice paper open and peered in, and there on the bed, his father's sitting on the edge of the bed, I'm guessing a futon, and he's pounding his thighs and laughing uproariously. And Ryon's mother is sitting right next to him, trying to close his jaw, to get him to be quiet. It just sounds crazy, like a mad person. Ha, 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 ha. And their uncle and aunt were visiting. They were sleeping in the upstairs room, and she's trying not to wake them. And sure enough, they come downstairs. What's going on? Is something wrong? Laughing through his tears. The next day, Ryon said he saw his father's thighs, and they were black with bruises. Did not matter. You can read about the aftermath of this experience in the 3 Pillars of Zen. Undoubtedly a great awakening. It shaped the rest of his life and ours too. These experiences do happen. all sorts. You could say all different degrees, maybe. And they are, by all accounts, deeply, deeply transformative. Great peace, joy, compassion, gratitude. Often people exclaim, "The Buddhas and ancestors have not deceived me." But as soon as we say the word enlightenment, that's a concept. What Kyozan calls secondary. That's one level of looking at it. But I don't think that kind of insight is what pleased Beiko. Neither would he deeply agree with Kyozan saying, there is, but it's secondary. If Beiko had seen this as simply a teaching on personalizing enlightenment, that long process of polishing away any trace of something special, that many of us know is called the third fruit of Zen. Forgetting the great forgetting of self that happens in Kensho, awakening. Sort of putting down the burden, you could say, of awakening. And then just living freely in the ordinary world. I suddenly flashed on Kon Roshi, and he would teach about this, and with his teaching stick, his chotsu, and hold it up and say, here's the ordinary dualistic world, this stick, flat. And something puts our feet on the path of practice. And we practice. And in some unguarded moment, completely unknown, suddenly this vertical reality. Everything gone and one. And then what? Practice. And you come back into this ordinary, the horizon of the world, just as it is. This is pictured in the 10th ox herding picture, that sort of final image of being completely at home in the marketplace with gift-bestowing hands. As beautiful as this is, Kyozan's response is not just an instruction like this. It's a turning word. Enlightenment is secondary, points to the essential reality of this world as it is, what it is, before and beyond our experience. To see it, get a taste of it, calls up returning to one of the most iconic experiences in all of Zen literature, and that is Dogen's awakening in China and his exchange with Tiantong Rujing, the master who ushered that in, or certainly triggered it. Many of us have heard this story, and Dogen finds his way to China, finally finds this master, recognizes this is where I need to practice. And one night during nighttime sitting, the monks are all there in the Zendo, and the monk apparently near Dogen was sleeping. It's night. And Rujing is just walking behind them, and he calls out You know, this Zen is not about sleeping. It's about body and mind falling away, or dropping away, or some translations say cast off. And Dogen hears that, and suddenly, and he gets up off his cushion and goes to Ru Jing's room, where he is then. And it's said calmly, lights incense and offers it. And Ru Jing says, what brings you here? You know, why are you offering incense? And Dogen says, I come with my body and mind fallen away. And Ru Jing says, in response, fallen away body, fallen away mind. And then again, as if to confirm, fallen away, fallen away. Dogen had had awakening experiences before. This one was complete. But actually, he's wrong. What Ru Jing confirms, Ru Jing is also correcting. It's not that body and mind fall away, though that is, certainly can be, the experience. But essentially, there is nothing to fall away, nothing to drop. Fallen away body, fallen away mind. That's what this is. Fallen away, fallen away. So then comes one of Dogen's, I mean, people say it was the question that really drove him in the beginning. You know, if all beings are from the beginning awake, fully awake, why do we have to practice? Because he knew we do. We need it. Some years ago, I had just a taste of this at a session that was up in Penticton, Canada, led by Ryon Roshi. The first day, as is the tradition, Roshi gave a talk on Mu. And we were so well cared for, this Sangha, like Mountain Cloud does this when this session comes here. Members of the Sangha just had helped doing all kinds of things to make us set it all up and welcome us. And they were invited to listen to the talks. So on either side, they were sitting in chairs. And the Roshi began, really addressing all of us. And then about 10 minutes into the talk, he said, now I'm going to start talking about reality. Some of you won't understand, but that's okay. That day, from that moment on, he didn't say another word. My guts were talking. And in the course of that talk, he told this story about Dogen. Told it in a way that just... So after lunch and the afternoon sitting, I had a place in the Zendo where I was looking right at the wall. It was a white wall. And somehow this phrase, fallen away, was just that wall. You know, this penetrating looking, what is that? Fallen away, fallen away. And in one moment, suddenly the place where I was sitting was vacant. And then, I don't know, a few seconds maybe, all of a sudden, everything came rushing in. There was a stream rushing by the zendo outside. When we first arrived, I thought, gosh, that's a pretty loud roar. How are we going to sit in this stillness? You know, all of a sudden, and the birds, and even the sound of the breeze. That can happen, something like that, in myriad ways, as many ways as there are moments. When awakening comes, however it does, there's something recognizable. There's something we know. This is real. And that recognition is secondary. There's another koan in our collections, one from the Blue Cliff Record, where two Dharma brothers are on an outing in the hills, it says. Sort of like what we're doing here. The younger monk of the two has recently had a very big experience. And he is full of joy and wonder and certitude. The koan says, you know, they're out in the hills, maybe the mountains, and suddenly this monk just points with his finger. Doesn't say if he here or there. Just right here is the summit of Mount Myo. Myo Peak, the summit, he says, right here. Right here. Myo Peak means peak of wonder. His older brother responds, exactly. But alas. I remember our root teacher, Ruben Habito Roshi, saying, we live our life in that alas. How poignant. How human. And how beautiful. Enlightenment is a delusion. The good news is, even our delusions are nothing but enlightenment. That secondary class is nothing but this awake world just showing itself like that. Dogen actually writes about this delusion, enlightenment, like with a hyphen, you know. With special emphasis in a chapter, a fascicle in the Shobogenzo that's called Great Enlightenment. Here's just one passage. It's Dogen. He writes, is it that great enlightenment is a single hand? Some of you might know that koan, the sound of one hand. Or is it that becoming deluded is a single hand? To inquire how a greatly enlightened person can become deluded should be the ultimate point of study. Know that there is great enlightenment that makes becoming deluded intimate. In another passage, Dogen describes awakening as intimacy with all things. In other words, we awaken to things exactly as they are, to who we truly are. Not two, not even one. At this year's Kenshukai, just 2 weeks ago now, Ryoun Roshi shared the story of his own beginnings in Zen. I'd heard most of it before, but I was struck again by the early seeds of his commitment. Their family, as he has told it, faced quite challenging circumstances early on. After World War II, they were living in Mongolia, and that went back to China. They had to flee back to Japan, and they only took what they could carry on their backs, piling onto these crowded, overcrowded trains. He was a young boy, and he still remembers, he says, the weight of the backpack that was assigned to him. I think he was about 5. The family was separated in all of that chaos and didn't even know if they'd find one another again. But they sure did. Once in Japan, the business that Koan Roshi started, I think 2, they each failed. And so the family managed only because Ryoun Roshi's mother could work as a doctor. So one day in his early teens, apparently, he decided to run away from home. And being a faithful son, he packed his backpack and went to his father to let him know, to declare, "Father, I'm leaving." His father said, "Oh, why don't you stay and we'll sit together?" And so they did. Ryoun started sitting, but he said he didn't like it. Boring. But 2 things kept him going. One was this filial piety, his love for his father. And the other was that one day he was in his father's study, looking through the books. Koan Roshi loved to read mathematics, philosophy, Zen. So Ryoun, the son, is just looking around, and he came across the letters of Yaeko Iwasaki, letters that she wrote to her Zen master Sogaku Harada, who had been, he was the teacher of Yasutani Roshi, who was the teacher then of Koan Roshi. Yeah. So Ryoun comes across these letters, and he said he was deeply moved. And I'd just like to share a little of that. Hearing that story again, I read the letters, reread them on our long journey home. So just a bit about Yaeko, I think it is, Iwasaki. She was a young woman from a wealthy family, fell ill as a child, and then in early adulthood came down with tuberculosis, started coughing blood, and the doctor said 3 years of bed rest. And she did that. She died at 25 from pneumonia. And along the way, there's a lot of context about her 5 years before she died, finding her way to Zen and becoming a student of Harada Roshi. So after 5 years of sitting, and much of it not so formal because she was in bed rest, she had Kensho. And then every succeeding day for a week, it deepened. It just kept falling. And each day she was writing to Harada Roshi. I would mention that she read in those 5 years when she couldn't always be sitting the way we are. She read the Shobo Ginso, very big work. She read it 17 times. So she's soaked in Dogen, in Dogen's world. Kyozan says there's no such thing for him. Oh, excuse me, he says there is this thing, this experience that we have. And when you read those letters from Iwasaki, yeah, you get a taste of it. So here's just a little bit of it. They're published, by the way, in the 3 Pillars of Zen. And that's the only place, I think, that they are publicly published. I mean, now you can see them online, but in terms of being part of a collection, it's interesting that Philip Kapleau and Koan Roshi worked on that together with the help also of, I think, of Yasutani. And so these letters that meant so much to Yamada Koan Roshi made it in. About the time, one more detail, that Yaeko contracted tuberculosis, her father was also diagnosed with a serious heart condition. And he was really gripped by the fear of his own, looming mortality, you could say. So he's the one who sought out Harada Roshi and began to sit. And Yaeko and her mother as well joined him. After a year of his practice, very committed, he had a Kensho experience. And it reinvigorated him so much that he went back to work. He was working for Mitsubishi, and out of that overexertion, he had a heart attack and died. So she has this loss and this clear realization of, human mortality. So, first letter, it's dated December 23rd, and this won't be much. And Harada gives it the title, Evidence of Kensho. In that letter, she writes, "Now that my mind's eye is opened, the vow to save every living being arises within me spontaneously. I am so beholden to you, Harada, and to all Buddhas. I am ashamed of my failings and will make every effort to discipline my character." That's a characteristic of this experience. This wish to help and in some way to match the world as it is. Or Roshi sometimes says to live up to it. Harada confirms her Kensho, and he's got these comments. And then he says, "As yet there remains a subject who is seeing." This has happened, and there's more to fall away. She's still, seeing this, kind of impressed, even a little prideful. The next letter is called Evidence of Great Awakening. She describes her experience. "My mind's eye is absolutely identical with yours. You, Harada Roshi, identical. I have forgotten everything and returned to my real home empty-handed." He has a comment of acknowledgement. She goes on, "I've been resurrected. I have been resurrected." This resurrection life, it's totally new. She says, "As have you and everything else for all eternity." And then finally, "Not a trace remains of what I have written." There is neither pen nor paper nor words, nothing at all. So the letters go on, each one progressively deeper, and each one in some way noting the smell, what's sometimes called the stench of enlightenment, and wiping it away. Toward the end, she writes, "You can appreciate how enormously satisfying it is for me to discover at last that just as I am, I lack nothing." Harada writes, "Even perfect enlightenment adds nothing one does not already have." Do people these days need enlightenment or not? Already so. So why do we practice? That's a living koan, threaded right through our sitting and our everyday human experience. And with it, the invitation to let our practice be the response. And I always, in these talks, and I really mean it, thank you for this shared practice. Just one more word before we chant tonight, our vows. And this weekend, this past weekend, at the end of that beautiful gathering, the festivities back in the Zendo, and Sarah made what I thought was a very fitting, touching plea to help this place keep going now and for another 40 years. And yeah, I just would like to echo that. One of the stories I heard from one of these founders who had been tasked with fundraising for Mountain Cloud, as in those years leading up to this. She told me that at the time, the Rochester Zen Center had 800 members. And if she's a volunteer, reaching out to all these people, she said 800 people gave something. Wow. So here we are. And yeah, whatever we can share to keep it going. These flyers are out here, that lovely piece, so artfully done, I feel. And there's a QR code if you want to make a donation that way. There's, I think Sarah posted it online. And again, thank you. Thank you all.